Thank you,
All
Shannon.
right, we're gonna get started. Introducing myself, my name is Catherine Donahue, and I'm a realtor with Green Properties Group at Compass.
Hi, guys. My name is Lexi, and I'm a loan partner with the Kutzos team. We are so excited to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you for joining us for Highway to Homeownership. The purpose of this event is to provide you first-time buyers with a high-level overview of the home buying process from start to finish. So whether you're a few months away from buying or many years away from purchasing your first home, the home buying process doesn't change that much over time. So this event is for you. And while exciting, this process can be daunting, confusing, overwhelming. So our goal tonight is that we finish providing you with a roadmap to home buying process, to the home buying process that you feel comfortable with and like you're walking away a little bit more confident than before.
And since this is a social event, we're trying to make this evening as interactive as possible. So we're going to have poll questions scattered throughout. We'll also be stopping periodically for questions, and we will reserve the final 5 to 10 minutes for questions and answers. In addition, after the webinar, we will follow up with everyone just to share our contact information, and we do have additional resources we can share with you guys as well.
Thanks, Lexi. So a little bit of background about each of us before we jump in. Like I mentioned, my name's Catherine. I'm a licensed realtor and one of the founding agents of Green Properties Group, which is a team of real estate professionals with over 20 years of combined experience in the greater Boston area. I grew up just outside of the city of Boston in Weston, Massachusetts, but I've lived in Boston's Back Bay for the past several years. So I do most of my work within Boston proper and the surrounding markets, including the Metro West area where I grew up. I work with both buyers and sellers, but I will say that my past in education, I was a high school history teacher in Winchester, actually, really lends itself to my love for first-time home buyers because I really enjoy educating the first-time buyer through the scope of the process.
And I am a licensed mortgage loan officer. I work on a family team a little bit north of Boston. I've been in the business for about 8 years. I work with my dad and our team. And combined, we have over 35 years of experience. We've won numerous awards in our field. Pretty much in short, we've seen it all. A lot of our clients are based in Massachusetts or New Hampshire, but I also am able to assist you if you're looking to purchase in Maine, Florida, Rhode Island, South Carolina, a few other states. So if you're looking to buy a vacation home or just move, give me a call. I'm your girl. And my absolute favorite clients to work with are first-time home buyers, similar to Catherine. I feel it's so rewarding to help you. This is an important chapter in your life, and I'd love to be a part of it.
We're going to start with a quick poll that's reminiscent of the pre-event questionnaire that we had sent out. So if Shannon wants to launch that, we'll give you some time to respond. We'll give it another few seconds. All right, Shannon, whenever you're ready. Fabulous. So most of us know that they want to buy eventually, but haven't necessarily begun the process of looking for a home. So that's really great. It's really reminiscent of what we saw in the pre-event questionnaire that we sent out. We saw that the majority of everyone that's on the call today is currently renting, looking to buy a primary residence at some point in the future. Most of everyone is excited about the home buying process, but looking for some clarity. So it's our hope that we'll be able to provide that this evening, so that when you do eventually start your home buying journey, you feel really prepared about what the process entails. So in keeping with our theme, Lexi and I are going to be your drivers tonight as we embark on the road of home ownership. We're going to cover 9 steps along the way, and you'll see those reflected on our presentation on the screen. So we'll start with finding your realtor, getting pre-approved, moving on to starting your home search, then making an offer, what to do if your offer is accepted or rejected, the purchase and sale agreement, your financing, and then finally your walkthrough and your closing. So before we jump into all of that, since most of us know that they want to buy eventually, but haven't necessarily started the home buying process, we did want to give some background as to what you can be doing now that might help set you up for a smoother process when you do decide to embark upon your journey. So think about these upcoming steps as the packing or the planning for your big road trip. The first thing that we'll do is we'll start with determining your vision. So this I'm breaking down into 2 points. The first is who's going to be involved in your home search. Who's coming in the car for the road trip with you? Are you looking and funding the purchase on your own? Is a partner going to be involved in that purchase? Perhaps your parents are contributing to the down payment, or you have friends or relatives that are going to have some say or some opinion in the home search process. So narrow down that list of who's actually going to be involved. And then the second step is to start creating your needs and wants list. So your needs and wants list is divided into your needs, which is your must-haves for your future home. At a minimum, this typically includes whether or not you're looking for a single family home or a condo, which neighborhoods you're looking to buy in, how many bedrooms do you need, how many bathrooms, what square footage. It might even go as far to say, like, I need a yard because I've got a golden retriever and he's going to need somewhere to go and run around. And then on the other side of that coin are your wants. So these are your nice to haves. What items would be awesome to have in your future home, but you would be okay doing without? Perhaps a finished basement would be nice if you could get it, but it's not going to be the one factor that makes or breaks your decision to purchase a home if it meets everything else on your list. And what I advise my clients is you should expect to get 80% of your needs and wants list. Like that's a great home. It meets the majority of your factors. It would be one that you could consider putting an offer in. Anything else on top of that 80 is gravy. And then the last step is to bring those two things together. Who's involved in your search and what you're looking for, and make sure everyone that's involved in your search is on the same page as to what you're looking for. So for example, you don't want to sit down with a realtor and your partner is describing this single family in the suburbs, 2-car garage, and you're turning them to them being like, that's not what we want at all. So you want to have those conversations ahead of time so that when you do engage with real estate professionals, everyone's on the same page and you're ready to go.
All right, so we actually have a polling question. Shannon, do you mind getting this perfect? How do you currently manage your budget? If you guys could please post your answers in the chat, that'd be great. Do you use an app? Do you use old school Microsoft Excel? Do you use a napkin? What do you use? Please let us know.
I'm seeing Excel spreadsheet, Google Sheets, Excel, lots of Excel, Mint, the app, Personal Capital, lots of spreadsheets.
Awesome.
Lots of Excel.
That's great. Yeah, that's that sounds about right. So before we get into mortgages, let's start at the very, very beginning, before you begin your search. And I'm guessing if you've started thinking about buying a home, then you've already begun to save. It sounds like a lot of you already have your methods, which is great. I love to hear that. And I want to say, if you aren't using an app, there are several good apps out there that can help you reach your goal. There are some that I've listed here. I personally love to use Mint, but it's really up to you to pick your favorite flavor. Most of you, it sounds like, don't even want to use an app. And that's great. You use an Excel spreadsheet. Some people use bullet journals. Some people might be a little wacky and just use a couple of scribbled notes on a worksheet. But really, the most important thing is that you focus on tracking your spending versus your discretionary income. As you can imagine, your purchase power relies heavily on how much you've saved. In our industry, we've seen people who make $40,000 a year have over $200,000 in savings, and vice versa. We've also seen people who make $200,000 a year have $10,000 saved. Really, the power is in your hands. This is one factor that you have control over and that you can make happen. So that being said, many of you have probably played around on Zillow, Redfin, any of those sites, probably dreaming of your future home, getting all excited, poking around. In order to figure out how much you should save, what I say is to think of the home that you'd like to purchase. You should aim to not only have a minimum of 3% of the purchase price saved, which would go towards your down payment, or that would be your down payment. You should also have an additional $8,000 to $9,000. Or in some cases, a good rule of thumb is to have saved a little less than 2% of the purchase price. This goes towards closing costs, escrows, prepaids, all that stuff that people don't necessarily think about, but are very important. It all factors into your pre-approval. And on top of that, in addition to that, I would also highly, highly recommend having an additional $3,000 of at least of savings minimum on top of that. Just because life happens, things happen, you move into a home, you spring a leak, or you need to change your locks, or a tree falls, you just want to make sure that you have some cushion just in case. You just want to be sure that you're not house broke by the time you get actually into your home. One good rule of thumb to save: if you live at home already right now with your parents and you're not paying anything, any sort of housing costs, a really super easy way to save is to pay yourself a mortgage payment. Just sock that money right into savings, anywhere from between 1,500, 2,200, anywhere in that range, sort of what you're expecting. Not only is that going to help you save mega fast, but it'll also prepare you mentally for the upcoming monthly cost of a home. If you can swing that when there's nothing at stake, then it's super easy to just transition right into the actual payment once that time comes. If you are living in an apartment and you can afford to do so, just pay yourself the difference between your rent and a mortgage payment. You just whatever, try to do those online mortgage calculators, see what the houses you're looking at, and try to go by that. That's also a really great way to save and also to mentally prepare yourself. I don't recommend waiting until you have 20% down saved if you don't already have it. The reason why I say that is because houses are appreciating at such a rapid rate. You've probably seen Zillow, as I mentioned, Redfin. You're seeing houses are, increasing in value. They're increasing in value so rapidly that the prices may outpace your savings goal. So there are lots of options for you, lots of down payment options. We'll touch upon those later, even up to 100% financing. It is best to go meet with a lender at when you start thinking of saving, to just go over what your financial goals are. Another big thing to consider before beginning your search is your credit score. And one reason it's a great idea to get pre-approved before beginning your search is because your lender is going to pull your credit. So what that means is lenders price their rates based on your credit score. So as you probably imagine, a higher score typically will allow for a lower rate. Rates do fluctuate in 20-point increments regarding your score. So for instance, you may get a more competitive rate if your score is above 740 as opposed to between 720 and 739. The difference might always be huge. You'll see a bigger difference the bigger the differences between your scores, but that's definitely a good rule of thumb. It could explain why sometimes when mortgage lenders quote a rate online, say your credit score is a little bit lower than perfect, that could explain that discrepancy. And also there are programs available for scores as low as 580. So if you do suspect your score maybe at or below 640, if you think that you might need a little bit of extra help, I highly suggest you speak to a lender sooner rather than later. It's super important. There definitely could be strategies available to increase your score before your purchase. And the sooner you speak to a lender and figure out what your score is and what you can do, the better. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. Your lender is there to help you increase your score, and that's super important. So we use three major credit bureaus, and what they do is they use an algorithm to calculate your scores based on a combination of these factors on this screen. As you can see, payment history carries the most weight. It's followed closely by the balanced limit you have in your credit card. We'll go over that shortly. Credit history plays a role. Ideally, your credit should be older than 3 years. You should have a mix of accounts. What that means is it's best if you don't have just credit cards. Lastly, inquiries, they can negatively impact your score as well. So what we'll do, we'll go into all these factors in great detail. The biggest factor is payment history. So your credit is impacted based on, obviously, whether you pay your bills on time. And it's also impacted by how late your payments are. The longer you let your lates go, the higher the impact. So lates are generally registered in 30-day increments, 30-day versus 60-day versus 90-day, 120-day. If you do suspect or if you do catch a late, it's best to play it obviously as quick as possible. Make sure you minimize the impact on your score. It also, something huge to note is that um, more negative weight is paid to the highest payments that you have. So for instance, if you have a mortgage late can be catastrophic for your credit, even just one. It's very important to stay on top of all your stuff. Next most important are things like auto loans, large student loans, etc. If you are struggling, it's best to reach out to the institution holding your credit as soon as you possibly can. Most of these institutions want your money, whether it's sooner rather than later. They're generally willing to work with you or figure something out or pause your payments. But no matter what, don't just let it slip. Don't let it slide. Always try to figure it out as soon as possible. Make sure you're on top of your payments when they're scheduled, what's going on, what you can do to try to minimize that. Whether it's you or someone you know is in that position, that's what I suggest doing. The next factor is the balance to limit ratio. So what that means is, as you can see on this example, if you have a credit card with a $10,000 limit and you have $4,000 on it as a balance, your ratio is 40. You want to keep your balance to limit below 30%, preferably as low as possible. You'll start seeing credit penalties when the balance gets above that 30% on the credit card limit. So try to close, keep it minimum as much as you can. It's definitely not crazy if it's up to the 30%, but anything above that, you definitely want to keep an eye on. So also, we touched on the length of credit history as being an important factor. And in this vein, I can't stress enough to never close out a credit line unless you have to. Never, never. A lot of times people are so used to, hearing that debt is bad, believing that debt is bad, and it's not great to have it. But a lot of times if someone's been in that position where they have a lot of debt and they pay it down or they pay it off, they have a knee-jerk reaction to just close their credit card and just be done with it. I highly suggest not doing that. If you or someone you know is in the situation, cut up the card, freeze your card, hide it, have your friend hide it, but do not close the account. The longer, as I mentioned before, the best credit is when you're older than 3 years old. So if you close down your account, this causes an immediate negative effect, and there's nothing we can do to undo the action. So you definitely want to just keep an eye on that. Make sure that you don't touch it. Just keep it somewhere and call it a day. It's also best to have a good mix of credit. So different types of things like student loans, car loans, home equity lines if you already own a home, a couple different credit cards, say you have a bank card and you have a couple store cards. All these things count as credit lines. Most people tend to have a good mix of credit. This is not something that, we generally suggest to work on unless you have nothing. And generally this is a slow and steady process of building up to this. As building off of before, the credit history matters. So if you don't have a good mix of accounts, don't just go open a bunch of things. You should slowly over time, and this is another reason why it's good to meet with someone as soon as possible, because if you do need a little bit of more of a mix, if that's what your lender's seeing, it's best to figure that out way ahead of time. Lastly, inquiries can negatively impact your score. And there are two types of inquiries. One is called soft and one's called hard pull. So soft pull inquiries will not impact your credit, but hard pulls will. And mortgage lenders always do a hard pull. So what this means is that a hard pull will temporarily reduce your credit score by about 5 to 10 points. And usually that little hit lasts for about a month or so. And once your credit is pulled, whether it's by a lender, a mortgage lender, or an auto lender, you have a 14-day grace period to shop other lenders without additional penalty. So if you are thinking, you do want to shop your lender, that 14-day period is the time to do so. Try to have time it so that they're all within that period. And there are things like, and we'll touch upon this a little bit shortly, the soft credit things may involve things like insurance inquiries, utilities. These will not affect your score, as I mentioned. So utilities, if you're, trying to establish your accounts for your new home, or, you have a job that needs to pull your credit for some reason, promotional offers, these will not impact your scores, as I mentioned. Sites like Credit Karma or annualcreditreport.com, or even sometimes the scores you get for free from your bank. Like I know, for instance, Bank of America does that. These are all a great way to keep the finger on the pulse of your credit. However, these models use a different scoring method than mortgage lenders do. We use something called a FICO 7. So therefore, your actual qualifying score when you go to get a home could vary by as much as 20 points. So another good reason, those sites will give you a great idea of where to go if you need to do some work. However, you will only really know your qualifying score once you speak to a lender. And what we do is we evaluate all 3 credit bureaus, and we will use your median score to qualify you. So, and if there's a co-borrower, say you're borrowing your partner, your friend, your parents, we would use the lower of those 2 median scores. So quick poll question before we go on. Does everyone know what their credit score is? Please let me know yes or no.
And while you're responding to the poll, I am monitoring the questions that are coming into the chat. We have some predetermined pauses where we'll pause for questions coming up. So rest assured, we'll get to them.
Awesome. Wow, a lot of you do know what your credit score is. That's great. I'm so excited to hear that. So hopefully everything's looking good and you don't need any work. But if you do, no, I highly suggest, once again, give someone a call. There is help for you. Things are not hopeless, so don't worry.
Thank you, Lexi. All right, so you can stay in the before you embark stage of this process for as long as you need. But our first actual step on the road to the home buying process will be engaging the services of a realtor. And I want to qualify this by saying, even if you are further out in your home search, it is never a bad time to contact a real estate agent. I think some people think that I can only contact an agent if I'm looking to buy a house or sell a house. Think of us more as like real estate advisors. You can reach out to us at any time to get a pulse on what's happening in the market, to find out what, the house next door sold, what's the value of my home based on, that recent sale. So any time of year, no matter your goals, just to check in, feel free to reach out to a real estate agent to start building that relationship and that rapport. I will say that on the home buying front, we tend to see people who are serious about buying a home reach out 3 to 6 months out from their purchase. So perhaps they're reaching out at the 6-month mark to find out what's the current market doing. And then they're reaching out kind of at the 1 to 3 month mark to actually start actively looking at properties to purchase. So let's dive into finding a realtor. We'll launch another poll question, and that's going to list a variety of duties. And the question is, which of the following does your real estate agent owe you as their client? Options are loyalty, obedience, full disclosure, confidentiality, reasonable care, and full account. We have a bunch of smarties here. The answer is all of the above. These are the 6, we call them fiduciary duties, that a real estate agent is obligated to provide to their clients. So we'll break it down by types of agents. We'll be using the term buyer and seller agent throughout this call. So buyer agent works exclusively for you, the buyer. They owe you all 6 of these fiduciary duties, and they are obligated to get you the best terms and conditions for your home purchase. On the flip side of that coin, a seller's agent, often called a listing agent, owes the seller all 6 of these fiduciary duties and is obligated to get the seller the best terms and conditions for their home sale. Because we're focused on home buying, I'll dive in a little bit to what services you can expect a buyer's agent to provide you, kind of breaking down those fiduciary duties. So when working with a real estate agent, you will get access to on-market, pre-market, and off-market homes that meet those criteria that you had listed out on your wants and needs list. That agent will show you those homes. They will provide you information about the local community, especially if you choose an agent that's local to that area. They'll present your offer to the seller and then negotiate with the seller's agent on your behalf. They will give you referrals to other real estate professionals. So if you don't have a mortgage lender or a real estate attorney, they can provide excellent recommendations, as well as a home inspector, title companies. They're connected within that world. And then they'll also provide you up-to-date market analysis and price comparisons to ensure that you're offering an appropriate price for the property that you ultimately select. And the best thing about all of these services and benefits is that they come at no cost to you. Typically, the seller is the one that pays the buyer's agent's fee. So in a really tight market such as this, and I know a lot of people had questions about the current market conditions, which I'm happy to go into after we overview the home buying process. In a tight market such as this, there's really no reason not to work with an experienced local real estate agent, because they may give you the upper hand throughout this home purchase process. Now, how do you find this great agent? Couple of different ways. The first way that I find people typically finding real estate agents, and that, us as real estate agents, our business grows, is really by word of mouth. So friends or relatives that have recently made a home purchase, ask them how their experience was with their agent, and perhaps you find an agent through that type of referral. Another way to go about it is to look at who are the agents that are working in the area that you want to purchase. Finding a local agent that knows that community and knows the market and the history of that market is going to give you an edge when submitting your offer. And I want you to treat your real estate agent like you would treat any other professional in your life, whether it's a CPA, a financial advisor, a doctor. Interview a couple of different real estate agents. Don't just go to the first one that knocks on your door, because the home buying process is really personal. It's filled with ups and downs. It can be a really invasive process into your family, your home, your finances. So you want to make sure the person you're working with throughout all of that is someone that you like and that you trust, and that you're a good fit for. So be really selective. It's your choice and you get to be choosy. I will also say that if you're located here in Boston and you're looking to buy, you're moving out of state and you're looking to buy somewhere else, and you have no friends or family out there to ask for a referral, and you have no idea who the local agents are, feel free to leverage your connections here in Boston. More often than not, I get phone calls of, hey, I'm moving to California. Do you know any real estate agents in that area? And I can leverage my realtor network, and I'll make some calls and do some vetting for you and make some recommendations for agents to speak to out in the California market. So don't feel badly kind of reaching out with that type of request. Happy to do that for you. After you find this agent, the next step is going to be to sit down with them. And they're going to ask you, what are you looking for? So that's when you bring your wants and needs list and you review that with your agent. The second question your agent will likely ask is, have you met with a mortgage lender? Are you pre-qualified? And if the answer is no, your realtor can make a referral to someone excellent like Lexi, so that you can sit down and start that pre-approval process, because it's really important before you start looking at homes that you move on to step 2, which is to get pre-approved.
Step 2. All right, next up, when you're ready, your lender will begin your pre-approval process by taking a mortgage application. As Catherine mentioned, it's super important to find a lender that you like and you trust. This process can be stressful at times. I'm not saying it always is, but a lot of times, especially if you're buying your first home, it can be a little overwhelming. There's a lot that new that's happening that most people don't deal with in their everyday day-to-day life. But the right lender will help you to make things as smooth, easy, and transparent as possible, and that is what you want. Most lenders work directly with the 2 major government lenders, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So most loan officers you speak to will need to fill out a standard form. So in this form, we'll ask about, if you've thought about what mortgage type you'd like, property information. We'll take your borrower information, your name, your date of birth, social security number, blood type, like blah, blah, blah. Just kidding. We won't ask for that, but we will ask for a lot of information regarding your employment history, your residence history, how much money you have and what accounts and what type of accounts those are, your liabilities, which are your debts. At this point, we'll also get permission to and probably will pull your credit. And if the app is taken over the phone, it should take only about 15 to 20 minutes. And some lenders do prefer that you take an online application. On our team, we like to speak to you personally. We feel that we can ask the right questions that way. And if there's things that need to be addressed, we can speak to you at that point. So a couple documents that your lender will most likely request from you: pay stubs, the most recent 30 days. For most people, that's your last two. Sometimes it's your last four if you're paid weekly. Your W-2s, which are the most recent 2 years, federal tax returns, not state, for the most recent 2 years, and your bank or retirement statements, which are the most recent 2 months worth of those. Um, well, the purpose of all these documents is to verify the information on your application. So your lender will want to just make sure that your income matches up with what you say it is, that your assets are there. They just want to make extra sure that everything aligns. Once they took a look at all these documents, there might be additional documents requested after review. If something on your paperwork seems like it needs a little bit more explanation, then we would need documents, verifying your answer. But overall, this list that I'm showing you is a really good starting point for what you can expect to be asked for right off the bat. There are two types of documents that a lender may issue you after taking your loan application. One is called a pre-qualification. So what a pre-qual is it's based on your verbal information only. And my dad, who's been in the business for a really long time, he calls these toilet paper pre-approvals because we have not verified anything on them. Doesn't mean that you can still sometimes show it to the realtor, and the realtor may accept your offer based on a pre-qual. I've seen it happen. Um, but for the most part, this market is pretty competitive. It's really best to opt for a full pre-approval. A lender who pre-approves you will ask for the documents I mentioned at the minimum. So as I said, because this enables them to verify all of your information and your credit, make sure there are no issues up front that could prevent you from qualifying in the future. This allows you to confidently make an offer when it's time on a home. This pre-approval is the strongest document that we as lenders can give you for your offers. So if your lender does not do the due diligence and does not ask you for these documents, we know it's a lot, but if they don't and they don't look at it, then you need to find another lender who will, because I cannot stress enough the importance of this. You do not want to find out after you've made an offer and your deposit is at stake that you cannot qualify and then you lose that money. That's not what we go for. We want to protect you as professionals, and that's what you should expect as well. So at this point also, the lender will also likely determine which loan program best fits your needs. First, most common that I've seen is a conventional loan. In order to get a conventional loan, you do need a minimum of 3% down. Your debt to income ratio must be under 45 or 50, depending on the underwriting algorithm and what that tells us. It depends on certain factors, your credit history or assets, liabilities. It is best when you get a conventional loan to have over a 680 credit score. And private mortgage insurance is not required on these loans if you have 20% or more to put down as down payment. So these are great loans, and there are some first-time homebuyer conventional loans available to borrowers who qualify. They will allow you to purchase a home with discounted rates, discounted private mortgage insurance. So those are really a great option. It does have income limits. So again, it's best to speak to a realtor, lender, because those income limits vary from county to county. So you want to, see if that's a possibility. If you can, why not? Save some money. I always try to look at that as an option if I know the borrower has a possibility of qualifying. There are also various state bond programs that go hand in hand with conventional loans. For instance, in Massachusetts, we have something called Mass Housing. The Mass Housing loan is excellent option, great, especially for first-time home buyers. They do have their own private mortgage insurance, their own rates. I can't stress it enough. And as I mentioned before, with 100% financing, this would go through Mass Housing. They have a down payment assistance program. You are able to get a second smaller loan that would cover your down payment. It has it's a small forgivable loan. It's excellent. There are also state grant programs that work in conjunction with conventional loans that could do the same sort of thing. And feel free to ask Catherine or myself about this program or any local grant program, and that can help you with those down payment costs. Another great option is an FHA loan. So FHA loans are great if your credit is at or below 680, or say you want to purchase a home a little bit more aggressively. For instance, one scenario that would really work in is if you are buying it with your partner, and your partner, for whatever reason, can't be on the loan, but you know that money is going to be a factor in your day-to-day life. The debt to income ratio for an FHA loan is a bit more aggressive, so we would be able to qualify you for a higher purchase price, or one that would be more comfortable for you with an FHA loan. The minimum down payment for an FHA loan is 3.5%. And we generally, if you qualify for a conventional loan on our team personally, we tend to put you more towards the conventional direction over an FHA, simply because unlike a conventional loan where the private mortgage insurance drops off at a certain point, on an FHA loan, the private mortgage insurance never does. So you would need to either refinance out of it or just keep it for the life of the loan. And sometimes the private mortgage insurance has a lower rate than conventional, but generally, if you can at some point get rid of a private mortgage insurance, we suggest that route. But one benefit is that FHA loans tend to have lower rates, so that is something to consider as well. Another great program, a really great program, if you have a military background, if you're a veteran, veterans loans are incredible. It's a really, really strong program for veterans. In some cases, you can be eligible for 100% financing, depending on what your certificate of eligibility says. You may qualify for certain MI benefits as well. For instance, if you receive disability from the VA, sometimes they will waive your mortgage insurance, and oftentimes they will. Again, depending on what your certificate of eligibility says. Lastly, adjustable rate mortgages, or ARMs, are another great option. They tend to, the initial rate for the initial term, like 3 to 5 to 7 years, tends to be lower than a conventional fixed rate right up front. But one thing to keep in mind is after that initial period of years ends, the rate could vary significantly, up to several points. So it is great if you're a first-time home buyer and you're thinking of just sort of getting your foot in the door with a new home. You don't think you're going to be there longer than 5 to 7 years. It can be a really great option. We typically, again, I can speak to my experience. If you're not sure, or if this is your forever home, we tend to suggest going with a conventional fixed rate above the ARMs, simply because rates are still historically low, especially right now. If you can lock in that rate, why not? You can always, you don't want to have an ARM and then have your rate go up to 4% later down the road if you could qualify for 2.5% now. Yeah, and so on to you, Catherine.
Thank you. And again, I promise that we'll get to all questions at our next checkpoint, if you will. All right, so back to our map. After you're pre-approved, you're ready to move on to our third step, which is to start your home search. But I want to qualify this by saying it's really important to reiterate, having heard from Lexi and being in the type of market that we're in right now, that being a pre-approved buyer makes you look serious and more qualified in the seller's eyes. So that's why in a seller's market such as this, seller's market being defined simply as like high buyer demand, low home inventory, there have been cases where sellers agents are not showing properties to buyers who do not have a pre-qualification because they just aren't coming across as being a serious buyer. So that's my plug for getting pre-approved. So shopping for the home, this can be the fun part. It's often kind of glamorized on HGTV or Netflix's Selling Sunset, but I don't want people to be disillusioned by like, it's always so fun to go look at homes. I think especially, I'll keep saying this, in a market such as this, there can be discouraging points in this process. So I just just be aware there are ups and downs, and this is where they start to come in. So this is the point that you and your agent start to go out on location, look at the homes that are popping up in your search that meet all of your criteria. And I'll just say at this point, communication is really key, because you might have thought that you wanted a single family home in the suburbs, and then you're going and you're looking at them and you're like, oh, no, 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 no. So just talk to your agent. I always check in with my clients after every home we saw. What did you like? What worked for you? What didn't you like? What didn't work for you? And then, do we need to adjust your search criteria in any way? Very common to make tweaks along the way. I will say that being an agent at Compass makes this communication a little bit easier. And if you're curious about some of the programs that Compass offers, I'll just say, for example, if you're used to looking at homes on Zillow or realtor.com, I would switch over to compass.com, because we have off-market properties as well as pre-market, so coming soon properties that don't get syndicated to those sites. So you can actually be viewing homes that aren't even on the market, yet, before other people see them. But happy to have those conversations offline. So in sum, your wants and needs list may change. Moving on to what's the physical activity you're doing when you are shopping for a home. So it might be a private showing. So your agent will contact the selling agent and set up a predetermined time for you to go and see the home. That's called a private showing. Or an open house. You probably are used to these being held on the weekends, open to the public. And I will say that buyers agents, I think it's sometimes a misconception that, agents can only show homes that they're the selling agent for, which is not true. A buyer's agent can contact any selling agent and set up a showing for you to go see their home. One thing to note here is that often it's really easy on some of these online platforms like Zillow or realtor.com to push that contact agent button. And I think, and before I got into real estate, this was where my mind went, but I push contact realtor on the property that I'm interested in. And I'm thinking that button is putting me in touch with the listing agent, the agent that's been in the home and has some type of knowledge or information about the property. When in reality, Zillow is putting you in touch with an agent that likely has never seen that home, but has paid to have Zillow put you in contact with them in the hope that you'll become their client. So I just want this to go back to our discussion about, you have agency to find an agent. It's your choice. Don't let Zillow make it for you. Do that vetting process to find an agent that you trust and feel good with, as opposed to just going with the first agent that Zillow throws your way. I'll get off my soapbox. Because we're under unusual circumstances, I just want to point out some COVID-19 guidelines that if you're going to open houses on the weekend, you're likely seeing. Everyone's required to wear masks inside the home. Oftentimes you'll have sellers that require either gloves, those will typically be provided by the listing agent, or having you take your shoes off or put booties on over your shoes, kind of those shoe coverings. Those are often provided by the listing agent as well. Often at weekend open houses, only one or two parties are being allowed inside a home at a time, which allows the list, what's the word I'm looking for? In order to get everyone in to see the home that wants to see it in the located time for that open house, an hour and a half, 2 hours, that means that listing agents are also sometimes imposing time frames of how long you can be inside the house. So for example, one party in at a time, 10 minutes max to look at the home. I know it doesn't sound like a lot of time, but it's 10 to 20 minutes, you can get a really good sense as to whether or not you could see yourself living in this home or not. Oftentimes there are opportunities for you to come back and spend more time at the home should you want to for a second showing. Because of this time limit and social distancing with one or two parties inside the home at a time, oftentimes if you're driving by on the weekends and you see a line outside the door, that's an open house. So you can expect wait times, especially on the weekends nowadays when attending open houses, especially in hot markets and in hot price brackets. Oh. Awesome. Sorry for my momentary lapse of brain.
No, great information, Catherine. Should we pause for questions real quick?
Let's do that. I think most of them are going to be directed towards you in terms of credit and loans. Let's give a few minutes for like a rapid fire question round, and then we'll move on
Sure,
to our next step.
absolutely.
Okay, so Lexi, what's the minimum and maximum down payment that one can put down?
So minimum is 0, because you have the 100% financing option, as I mentioned, through Mass Housing, or there are grants available through certain cities. If you're looking for a grant through a city, it's best to just check that a lot, pretty often, because the grants through the cities may change over time. They have to always be reevaluating their budget. But Mass Housing, during COVID, they temporarily paused their 100% financing program, but they have resumed it in the last few months. It is great, especially if you're sort of at the beginning of your savings journey, but you want to buy a house now. It will allow you to use most of your savings and your money towards those closing costs, those prepaids, and hopefully your cushion. And the
How
max
about
down payment is unlimited. I mean, if you have the money, just put down as much as you can.
awesome? Yeah, we submitted an offer the other day at 50% down payment. So I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
it can go up 90%. Anything.
absolutely. Pretty much
Um,
limited only by you.
and in terms of having a variety of different kind of debt sources, if you will, if you're close to paying off, let's say, a car payments, should
Mhm.
you stall and wait in order to continue that variety in your portfolio, or should you get it paid off?
No, I would continue paying your car like normal. That mostly applies to credit cards. So if you have credit cards or home equity line or anything like that, keep those lines open. There are two different types of debt. One is called revolving, and one is called installment. An installment debt is like you said, a car payment. Um, Whereas revolving is the one that you just want to keep open. Installment has like a beginning and end. You just want to just pay that off. Just go with it, whatever the terms are, and that won't be a huge problem. Chances are you're probably fine with what you have even without that auto payment.
Can you use a lender in a different state than you, and does it matter?
Oh, absolutely. As long as the lender is licensed in your state, whatever state that may be that they're in, and whatever state they have their license in, they should be able to work with you. And if not, they can probably refer you to someone who can.
How many
As
lenders should you shop for different rates, and what should you be looking for?
I mean, I say 0, just go with me. But, but as Catherine mentioned, it's probably best to look at 2 or 3. Um, you know, in terms of shopping for rates, obviously you wanna get the most competitive rate, you wanna get the cheapest option, but there's more than just that when it comes to your lending and your financing. Your lender is hopefully a lifelong relationship. There are a lot of lending companies and mortgage companies out there that you know they might have different priorities. You really want someone who has your best interests at heart and somebody who's willing to take the time to sit with you, talk to you, answer your questions. If you're in the middle of something and you're freaking out at 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, you want to be able to text your lender and ask them what's wrong. You want to, if there's something that you don't understand, you want to be able to call them, FaceTime them, Zoom them, show up at their office and surprise them and ask them. You don't want to be, I mean, again, I don't want to throw any other lending companies under the bus, but you don't want to be with a company that's very transactional. And also, another angle to that too, and Catherine might be able to corroborate with me on this, is that if a lot of times, especially in this competitive market, if a listing agent sees a pre-approval from maybe a lending company that they're not familiar with, or that they are familiar with in a negative way, there are some notorious infamous banks that tend to have a lot of delayed closings. They don't have a good track record with closing on time. You do want to make sure that, and sometimes those are some of the bigger banks. You do want to make sure to, when you speak to your realtor, that you just speak with them about who they recommend and what they think, because your realtor should be able to point you in the right direction for a reputable lender, a personable lender, and someone who has your best interests at heart.
Awesome. We have a few more, but I'm going to wait until we have our next question break in order to keep us moving.
Sure.
Lexi, I know you've got a poll question coming up.
Oh, absolutely. So, true or false, everyone? Are you are required to have a pre-approval letter in order to make an offer? Oh, this poll is popping.
I think we're good.
All right. Well, we gotcha. You do need a pre-approval in order to make an offer. The listing agent and the buyer agent will both want to make sure that if you're getting into that stage, that you are qualified to be there.
If you are not pursuing financing through a mortgage lender, what would be the exception to that rule?
So the only exception is if you're buying the home in cash and you don't need financing.
In that case, you would just need proof of funds to purchase the home.
Mhm.
Awesome. So now we're going to talk about you've shopped for homes, you've gone your shopping, you've found the one, you've fallen in love, you're ready to purchase or hopefully purchase your home. So what will happen at this point is you, your agent, and your loan officer will work together to put together an offer to purchase, which is an agreement to pay a certain price for the home that you like. Now, in simple terms, there are two main factors that people want to talk about when it comes to the offer. The first is the purchase price. So this is the price you are offering to pay for the home, and it should be based on two things. The first is it should be based on your pre-approval amount, that you're not paying more than you're approved by your lender to pay for the home. The second is it should be based on what's called a comparative market analysis, or a CMA. And that's something that your realtor will pull together. They will look at similar homes that have sold in the vicinity of the house that you love in a like recent time period. So whether 3 months back or 6 months back, what they're looking to do is get a sense of the market. What has a home like this sold for, so that we can put in a competitive, fair market price? Now, the second element beyond the purchase price is what are called contingencies. And contingencies are the conditions under which you are willing to purchase the home. And we'll discuss contingencies in a moment, but you can think of like an example of one might be the home inspection is an example of a contingency. In addition to those two major components, your offer will also include the property address, which home are you looking to purchase, the timeline for when the seller needs to respond to your offer and give you the yes or the no, a timeline for when the P&S will be signed by you and the seller, and P&S meaning purchase and sale agreement. And then lastly, a deposit for typically $1,000. It's called your earnest money deposit. And that is refunded to you if your offer is rejected, but it is kept by the seller. Actually, rather, it's kept in the selling agent's escrow account as we call it good faith money. I am submitting this offer. You have $1,000 from me. I am serious about this offer. I'm not going to ghost you, because you have $1,000 of mine. It's a little bit of an exchange to show how serious you are as a buyer. So once your offer gets submitted, this is when we enter on our roadmap, kind of our rotary. There's a couple of different options that can come with it. And one possible option is that your offer is rejected. This can happen for a number of reasons. The offer price that you offered is lower than the listing price or than the seller is willing to accept for the home. The offer has terms or contingencies that are not acceptable to the seller. Or in today's market, perhaps the seller got numerous offers and they just decided to go with someone else's because it was stronger than yours. So they could reject it outright. The other option is that they could come back to you and say, hey, I'm wanting to negotiate this with you. I'd like to get a deal done, but I want to counter your price, or I want to counter some of the terms. So they can come back to you with what's called a counter offer, which then the ball is in your court. You can either accept, reject, or send another counter offer their way. So that your two agents, the buyer's agent and the seller's agent at this point, are negotiating on your behalf, kind of going back and forth with counter offers with the goal of arriving at a mutually agreeable offer that both sides are excited about. Which we'll talk about in a moment. But just to tie this section up, if your offer is rejected outright, you would then just return to step 3, which is shopping for homes. You'd continue to look at properties until you found the next one that you loved, and then you can submit an offer there and repeat this process. But hopefully we move on to step 5, which is that your offer is accepted. So I want to throw a poll question out to you. Once the seller has signed and accepted your offer, The home now belongs to you. True or false? Excellent. So most of you are correct. The answer is false. Once your offer is selected and accepted, you and the seller are now under contract, meaning the seller cannot market the home to any other buyers, can't show the home to other buyers, can't entertain or accept any other offers. You two are engaged in the dance together now, but you do not own the home yet. We've got a little ways to go before we get to that point. So before we get there, we had mentioned contingencies. And this is the point that we want to cover, some of the common contingencies. And we're going to throw out another poll question. We're going to list 5 different contingencies. Which of the following are examples of contingencies that you might include on your offer? Hopefully you're able to select more than one. Fabulous. Thank you. So on our next slide, we'll see that all 5 are examples of contingencies that you could potentially include in your offer to the seller. These are not the only contingencies, but I will say that these 5 are the most common. We'll dive into 4 of them in more detail: home inspection, financing, appraisal, and title. The one that we won't talk so much about is home sale, because our audience is made up mostly of first-time buyers. And what a home sale contingency says is, seller, I, the buyer, will buy your home, but first I need to sell my home. So this would be if you had a previous residence that your offer was contingent upon you selling before you were able to purchase the seller's home. So let's dive into the most common contingency, which is the home inspection. According to the National Association of Realtors, over half of offers come in with home inspection contingencies. And I know there will be a lot of questions about, in this market, I've heard a lot of people waiving contingencies. I'm happy to discuss the current market at the close of our presentation and let you know some things you can do to make your offer stronger. But under normal circumstances, or even these circumstances, you're going to talk about whether or not to include a home inspection contingency. So let's just describe what it is. The home inspection is something that the buyer orders. So this typically costs about $400 per 2,000 square foot home, can range from $200 to $800 depending on the size of the home. Many of you asked about costs outside of the down payment, and we'll talk about closing costs towards the end at the closing. But this is an example of a cost that you as a buyer would incur outside of what your down payment is. It's really important for buyers to know that there is no such thing as a completely clean inspection. Items are going to come back even on new construction. But inevitably, when those issues are found, many of them are easy to fix. And some of them are just simply the inspector flagging information to buyers about potential problems that may or may not occur down the road. You can think of your inspector kind of like your general physician. They are so knowledgeable about a wide breadth of things. But the inspection can also prompt you to get a specialist in there. For example, your doctor might refer you to, I don't know, a specialist for whatever issue that you're having. Exactly. The inspector is going to give you the breadth, and then it's up to you whether or not you want to have additional specialists come in to do depth. After the inspection, you will have a couple of different options. I'll narrow it down to 3. 1, you move forward with your original offer, just having the knowledge that you've now gained from the inspection. That would be perhaps a really clean inspection report comes back. 2, let's say there are structural issues, extensive water damage. In those situations, I would advise that my clients walk away from the deal. So that's what you can rescind your offer. There's no penalty there, and you go shopping again for another home. And then 3 is kind of our Goldilocks in the middle, where you may go back to the seller and you say, hey, I'm willing to fix X, Y, and Z items after I purchase the home on my own, but I would really love for you to fix A, B, and C before I move in. So you can negotiate to have the seller make repairs. Perhaps the seller gives you a cash credit at the closing table for you to make the repairs on your own. Or you can go back and say, hey, we found, the water heater needs to be replaced. I'm going to, can I reduce my offer price? by however, whatever dollar amount. And then the negotiation process starts again. The inspection can be a really stressful process for both buyers and sellers because both of you want this deal to go through. So it's really important just to rely on your real estate agent, and they'll flag what's a big issue, what's a little issue, and then they'll advise you as to how to negotiate that with the seller along the way.
This next one I'll take over. So a mortgage contingency basically means that unless you're purchasing your home in cash, most people do not, you will need financing to buy it. And it's understood by both the buying and the selling parties that the process of getting a mortgage takes approximately 30 days, give or take. I've seen the financing process take as little as 7 days, and it may take 60, 90, 120 days, depending on what's going on. There are a bunch of different factors on the selling side, the buying side. Say the buyers, it's contingent on them selling their home. They need the funds from their home sale to buy a house. Could take longer for that. Or say the seller is building the home. The financing process could take longer for that as well. If none of those factors are in and it's really up to you, the borrower, then it really depends on how quickly you can get us your documents back, and how quickly you can work with us. And that's when those really, really quick closings happen. In this market, with things being, with the refinance boom that just happened and with things being so competitive, things have been taking a little bit longer across the board. So in the Boston market, generally we say 30 to 45 days is the standard. So when we say, oh, the borrower needs to work with us to make things faster, that basically just means that during the financing process, we will get up-to-date paperwork from you depending on when your pre-approval was done. It also involves getting title reports from the attorney, appraisals from the appraiser, which we will go over those two things in greater detail shortly. If you're buying a condo, we need additional documentation from the condo association, usually to make sure that the condo is able to be warranted by the government agencies that will provide the mortgage in the end. So you get the drift. The quicker we get everything back, the quicker we go.
Awesome. Now, the next step is to move on to signing the purchase and sale agreement. And this can happen. My rule of thumb is typically 7 days after an accepted offer, but that will definitely depend on how many contingencies you have, when your home inspection is executed. But it happens quite quickly, actually, after the offer is accepted. And we've got a poll question for you. Once your purchase and sale agreement is accepted, so signed by both the seller and the buyer, the house now belongs to you. True, false?
Ooh, this is a close one.
I know. Very exciting.
Suspense is killing me.
This is very close. So this is a common misconception. The home is not yours. You have not yet closed on the home when the purchase and sale agreement is signed. You are one step closer. You are further engaged in a more binding contract with the seller, but there are still items like your mortgage contingency that needs to come through at that 30-day mark, whereas this purchase and sale is signed at the 7-day mark. And we can talk a little bit more about those items. But to summarize what the purchase and sale process is like, your offer is accepted. So while you're working on the home inspection with your agent and Lexi is working on kind of getting your financing in order, your attorney, who your realtor can make a referral to a real estate attorney, they are working on drafting the purchase and sale agreement. I will say, and this is a side note, if you have a realtor, a lender, and attorney that are used to working together as a team, that can make this process a little bit easier. They know each other's work style, they know how to communicate, perhaps they have each other's text message, their cell phone numbers, and they can text. But if they're used to kind of jiving together, so if you get your realtor to recommend like, hey, I usually work with this loan officer and we work really well with this real estate attorney, that team can just make things a little bit more stressful and smooth. It's by no means a requirement, but it can be, an added benefit. So the seller's attorney will start drafting a purchase and sale agreement, and they'll send it to your attorney. The seller's attorney job is to protect the seller. The buyer's attorney job, your attorney, is to protect you. So when your attorney receives the purchase and sale agreement, they're going to go through and edit, revise, and put in language and clauses that make sure that you are protected. This might go back and forth. And then as soon as the buyer and seller are both at a point where they agree to the terms and language of the purchase and sale, the contract is signed. Now, along with the purchase and sale agreement, you as the buyer are going to submit a deposit. Now, your first deposit was submitted with the offer, that typically $1,000 in an earnest money deposit. This will be your second checkpoint, shows that you're a little bit more serious about your purchase. Typically with the purchase and sale, you'll put down 5 to 10% of the purchase price. And I have to let you know that both the earnest money and this deposit with the purchase and sale, they get put towards your down payment. So it's not in addition to your down payment. These numbers will be subtracted from what you ultimately end up paying as a down payment at the closing table.
And let me just add one more thing too, Catherine. Those two deposits are non-refundable at this point if you decide to walk away. Next step, proceed with financing. So once your offer has been accepted, that's when the real fun starts. Once we get that purchase and sale agreement or that offer, accepted offer paperwork. So at this point, we get to work. We fill in any missing pieces on the loan application. We adjust any numbers on the loan estimate based on your agreed upon purchase price, your comfortable down payment amount, your closing date, even the state you're purchasing in. Different states have different times of year when their taxes are collected. They have different styles. Some states require tax stamps. All of these affect your final numbers. So really that's dependent. That's something that, again, if you speak to your lender and you say, I want to buy a second home in Florida, your lender will say, okay, we'll just be prepared for to pay a year of taxes up front. All these things come into play at that point. And what your closing costs encompass are your lender fees, attorney fees, generally a few months of prepaids, which these are your taxes and insurance, and these establish your escrow account. Your escrow account is how your mortgage lender pays your taxes and insurance out of your monthly payment. So they pay these on your behalf. It's established up front. It's refueled basically every year out of the mortgage payment that you make. Typically, you cannot waive the escrows if you're putting under a certain amount, usually 20 to 25%. And a lot of times buyers are not able to waive the escrows. I personally don't recommend it. I think it's a good protection. Escrows, depending on what your escrow account is, the mortgage company recalculates it every year. And your payment could go up and down slightly if taxes increase, if your insurance increases, or conversely, if they decrease, your payment will be recalculated. So if you purchase a home and in a year or so you see your mortgage payment has gone up slightly, that's the reason why generally. Another thing to keep an eye out for, another another two payments that you have to look out for are the appraisal fee. That's paid outside of your closing. So that's paid before the closing table, a couple $100. That goes directly to the appraisal company. We don't get that. That's to pay the appraiser. Another thing is your home insurance. Home insurance, for the most part, requires you to pay your premium right up front for the first year. So you'll pay that $1,200 amount, say, I'm just pulling that number out, but you'll pay that right up front. A lot of times before, or you can choose to pay it at the closing table. And then the prepaids that we collect will establish your escrow account for the second year you're in your home. Another thing to keep an eye out for is points. So a lot of people have, if they're serious about buying a home, they may have heard of points. And some lenders do charge these to reduce your rate. So a lot of times we in our office do not charge points unless we've actually sat down and discussed it with you and it makes sense for your financial strategy. A lot of people tend to have this misconception that points are bad. They're only really bad if they're deceptive. If you're comparing lenders and the lenders, you go to one lender and they said, oh, I can get you a 2.5% rate. And the other lender's like, I don't know how they did that. I can only give you a 3. keep an eye out for, that's why when you are shopping lenders, a lot of lenders will say, well, let me see the paperwork, because a lot of times, if that's the case, the points might not be clearly labeled out. And that's definitely something you should keep an eye out for. Ask your lender questions about every single line item. You want to make sure that the numbers make sense. Points can be good. A general rule of thumb with points. So 1 point, I'll describe what it actually is. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. 1 point equals 1% of your loan amount. That percentage is collected at the closing table. A rule of thumb to make it worthwhile is that for every 1 point you pay, you should get a quarter off of your interest rate. So if you plan on staying in your home a really long time and you plan on going nowhere, then yes, it can be definitely beneficial for you. Over time, that cost will for sure break even. Your lender can help you calculate that break even point if you change your mind how long you want to stay in the home. But if you find your forever home and you want to be there, it can certainly be a great option if you have the money and and it makes sense for you. Uh, Also at this point, once we confirm all of your closing costs and your purchase price and your down payment and all those things are put together, the lender will send you a set of documents called the initial disclosures. So the purpose of these documents, usually they're sent electronically to your email through a portal or a loan hub. What the purpose of them is to give you a breakdown of what the initial terms and costs of the loan is. So it's meant to be for the loan process to be fully transparent to you right off the bat. You don't want to go all the way through financing and realize that you were blindsided. Maybe your closing costs are $5,000 more than you thought. It should at least be within a degree fairly accurate at this point. May not be exact, things could change, and God forbid you need to renegotiate, things could change. But again, this is to show you sort of like what you're getting into. It's important to note that these are not binding. You will be required to sign those, and the reason why you're required to sign those is because the lender needs your signature as an acknowledgement that you want to proceed. So the lender can only proceed with financing once you sign and acknowledge those disclosures. So it's very important that if you're looking to buy a home and you're on a tight timeline, that you sign those really quickly after asking your lender all the questions you need to ask. Also at this point, we'll ask you for any additional documents that we need. So there are some things like updated pay stubs and bank statements if we need those that are available generally pretty quickly. Most people have access to those, especially if you're buying a home. There are other things like your homeowner's insurance information that will be available in time once you've shopped. Another thing, for instance, that might not be available right away is that lenders will require proof that the earnest money deposits that you made, that money has left your account. That also will not be available right away, and that's okay. The lender understands that. Even if they ask for it upfront, it's more just to tell you so that you're aware and that you're prepared. So once I have your intent to proceed, I would begin ordering things called verifications. And I'll get into that in a minute. But I also need to say just one major mortgage don't at this point to keep in mind, as just like you shouldn't close any lines of credit if you're looking to build your credit, you should not open any new lines of credit when you're going to get a mortgage. Please, 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 please. I know it's so exciting to get a house and you want to fill it with furniture and exciting things and you want to, just go to town. But if unfortunately sometimes, and I've seen it happen sadly, somebody might go charge a bunch of furniture, they might get couches, beds, whatever, and that additional debt might just be the thing that pushes you over the edge where you don't qualify anymore. So please wait until after you close to buy your furniture, to buy your car. Catherine doesn't want to see you rolling up in a new Mercedes at the closing table, please. But yeah, just pretty easy to keep in mind, but very important. So in terms of the verifications I need, the first is an appraisal. Appraisals are a little bit different than a home inspection. It seems like they might be the same thing, and a lot of people get a little confused at this point. Appraisals are ordered directly by us. You will not need to order this or worry about it. So what it is it's a report completed by a third-party vendor. And we as a lender are not allowed to have any communication beyond ordering this with the appraisers, just to keep it as objective as possible. And what the appraiser does is they use multiple factors to make the price assessment as objective as possible. So they'll look at things like the number of bedrooms, the square footage, prices of recently sold comparable properties, which are also called comps. If you're speaking to your realtor, these all play a role. So it's very important that your appraisal comes in at least the purchase price, because we, as your lenders, can only use either the lesser of the purchase price or the appraised value to lend. So at this point, if your appraisal amount came in lower than expected, you again have a couple options. You have the option of renegotiating the price, or you have the option of bringing the difference to closing. This is when having a realtor like Catherine is so super important. I mean, our team works with a lot of agents, and Catherine is spectacular, as you can probably, as you've, I'm sure, seen throughout her whole presentation. She's unbelievable. Having someone like Catherine in your corner at this point is imperative. You want to make sure you have someone experienced who can negotiate your price down to something that's comfortable for you. The worst thing in the world is if you are super tight on funds already, and you know you just can't swing it at that point. Catherine will help you to avoid that if she can. The other thing that we would order at this point is the title work from your closing attorney. So what a title report is the attorney does research to make sure that when you purchase a property, there are no liens, there's no contested titles, or anything that could bar your direct ownership of the home. The attorneys do a lot of great work. We want to make sure that when you buy outright. There's nothing standing in your way. There are a couple different costs associated with the attorney at this point. That one is not optional. It is the title insurance for the lender. The lender needs that to basically insure the loan amount against any potential title issues. The other is something that you may hear is optional. It's called the owner's title insurance. Even though it is technically optional, I would say it's not optional. God forbid, again, just with having extra savings, this is a huge purchase. You want to protect yourself. And, you never think that your attorney's going to screw up. And generally they don't. They're professionals. They know what they're doing. But, there could be situations, for instance, a deed with a forged signature on it, and the attorney doesn't know that signature is forged, because who would if it's an old one? And someone comes forward and says, "Oh, that wasn't me. I didn't sign that." And then it becomes a little bit of a cloudy gray issue. That's when your owner's title will step in and protect you. And that, even though it is a cost, it's definitely a worthwhile cost. You want to make sure that you're protected. So during this time also, once all those are ordered, your paperwork is updated, my processor will be in touch with you in conjunction with myself. Most lenders have processors that get down in the trenches and make sure that all of the nitty-gritty details of your documents are organized and ready to be submitted into underwriting. So basically, if this were a soccer game, your processor will be your offensive player. Any questions or concerns the underwriter is going to have, that will be addressed by the processors, and they will be in touch with you throughout the entire whole process, just asking you questions, getting any documents that they might need to answer those questions, and they will get you to the closing table, basically. Another important figure to note is the underwriter, of course. The underwriters are the guideline gurus. So their job is to ensure that the company is able to sell your loan to the investor that will ultimately hold your mortgage. So whether that's Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, FHA administration, the Veterans Administration, whoever that's going to be, the underwriter has to make sure that everything in your file conforms to their standards. So they're going to dig really deep to make sure that every piece of your financial picture is clear, makes sense, and it fits those guidelines. They're the goalies. So basically what's going to happen is your loan's going to be submitted by your processor into underwriting for review a couple times, generally 2 or 3 times. You can expect that to happen. Each time we're aiming to have fewer and fewer conditions left to satisfy, until finally the processor is able to issue you a commitment letter. So what a commitment letter represents is the lender's commitment to, you guessed it, lend. You want your money. This is a promise to you that you'll have your money to purchase the home. And all the realtors will want to see this, especially the listing agent. Generally, the conditions left to fulfill on this commitment letter They should be extremely minimal at this point. And a lot of times those conditions, if any, are internal to us. So you wouldn't even know about them or have to worry about them. If there are conditions that need to be fulfilled by you, your processor or your loan officer will communicate it to you at that time. And so it should not be a surprise or unexpected. And then once your loan is clear to close, your processor is going to send you your closing disclosures. So unlike the initial documents, these closing disclosures will contain the final terms of the loan. So your rate is locked for sure at this point. Your closing costs should be very accurate. Your monthly payment should be very accurate. So this is the point where it's real. So it is also imperative at this point that you sign these closing disclosures a minimum of 3 days before closing. Your processor will send them to you a few days before closing. Keep an eye out for all communications from your mortgage team. They will also be calling you. We'll probably be right on your case. You'll be ready to put a restraining order on us. But so you probably shouldn't miss it. But again, we can't close you unless it's within 3 days of your closing date. And this is for compliance reasons. This is not a company specific thing. This is a industry wide thing.
I know we're coming up on 7:30, but that's good because we're at our last step. I'm sure Lexi and I will both be willing to stay on for another 10 minutes or so to answer any questions. But this is the walkthrough and the closing. So typically this happens 30, 45, 60 days after your offer is accepted. And the reason why you don't close immediately after your offer is accepted is because you need that month or 2 months to remove all of those contingencies we've been talking about, to have your home inspection, to get your appraisal, to get that commitment letter from Lexi. And usually the commitment letter from your loan officer signals the final contingency has been removed. Like, you're going to get financing, so now we can move on to the closing. So that's kind of your green light typically to go ahead and close on the property. What will happen initially, typically the morning of the closing or a couple hours prior, is that you and your real estate agent will go to your future home and you will do what is called a walkthrough of the home. And it's exactly what it sounds like. You walk through the home to confirm that no damage has been done to the home since you were last in it, usually during the inspection, that if you had requested from the seller that they fix anything that came out of the inspection, that those systems and appliances, that those inspection items had been addressed. And you also just want to be in there to make sure that any systems and appliances are in working order as they were when you first viewed the home. So it's like a little check-in to make sure that you're getting what you agreed to purchase. And then our last poll question is going to be, you've seen this before, once the closing documents are signed and your deed is registered, the house now belongs to you. You guys are smart.
Looks like
yes. That is correct. Once the deed is registered and you have you've signed all your closing documents, you receive your keys. So Lexi is going to dive into what happens on her end at the closing table, and then I'll wrap up with what happens kind of on our end.
So basically what happens on our end with the closing attorney, our closing department, once they receive the clear to close, will be in touch with the attorney, factoring all the numbers, making sure that all of your closing costs are as accurate as possible to the penny. We want to make sure you're not paying more or less than you need to. We want to make sure everything's accurate, all final conditions are met. And basically what will happen is a day or so before closing, your attorney is going to reach out to you and give you the exact final number you need to bring to the closing table. So at that point, they'll be in touch. You'll need to make sure that you have a cashier's or bank check. Most attorneys will not accept anything different for that exact amount that they told you. And the attorney will also be speaking with you to schedule the closing at a mutually agreeable point. So either most of the time, I'd say 90% of the time during normal circumstances, it's at the registry of deeds. Unfortunately, right now, most of those registries of deeds are closed to the public. So generally they take place at the attorney's office, if that works for you. And at this point, all the final documents are signed. You're going to have a little hand cramp, but you will be a homeowner, and congratulations.
That's right. Yeah, your keys go to you. This is where your closing costs are paid out, like Lexi said. And just to list some of those items, because I know this was a big question, but they include items like the appraisal fee, the loan origination fee, the loan processing fee, any loan discount points, private mortgage insurance, your attorney's fee. If you purchase a condo, you're paying the association dues at that time, home insurance, property taxes, title insurance. So when people talk about closing costs, it encompasses a wide variety of things. And I advise my clients, I'm a little more conservative. And I say budget between 2 to 5% of your purchase price to cover all your closing costs and any additional expenses as well. But that is the home buying process. You get your keys and then you're good to go. I know we've had some questions in the chat, so we'll address those now. If you need to jump off at any point, you don't want to stick around for the discussion, please feel free. Lexi is going to pull up a slide with our contact information should you have questions that occur to you over the next few days. And just to reiterate, we will follow up with an email that has our contact info as well as some goodies, some handouts and additional resources that might be helpful in your home buying process. So just want to thank everyone that joined, and feel free to stick around for some Q&A as well.
Thank you, everyone.
Lexi, you want me to dive in and pick up where we left off with questions?
Please do. I would love
Awesome.
that.
So this will go back to the pre-approval process. Can you, is it okay to get pre-approved at one lender and then ultimately change lenders for who you get your mortgage from?
Yes, it's definitely possible.
Okay.
I don't like to hear it.
How long does the pre-approval last? When does it expire?
So your pre-approval generally, we do it so that it lasts about 120 days. So that's how long a credit report is good for. So once the credit report expires, that's when we consider your pre-approval expired. It may be that your lender may request that you give updated documents like updated pay stubs, bank statements, just to keep everything as refreshed as possible, especially if things are tight or questionable in any way. But yes, generally it's the time that the credit report is good for.
Can you talk about the downside or pros and cons of private mortgage insurance and when one would be obligated to pay that?
So the private mortgage insurance, I guess the downside is that you have to pay it. The good thing about private mortgage insurance is that it does allow your mortgage lender to give you a mortgage with less than 20% down. So if you have a conventional loan, unless you have 20% down or more, private mortgage insurance will be required. When you actually have your loan, and you have a conventional loan, the private mortgage insurance will drop off once you reach 78% loan to value, your loan amount to the value of your home. That could be because you just paid it down. That could be because your house value went up. The lender will use their own schedule to determine when that is. But if you feel that you're eligible before then, either because you paid more or because your house has gone up, you can request your mortgage lender look at it at that point and see if you're eligible for it to be removed without refinancing. For FHA loans, as I mentioned, the private mortgage insurance is always going to be there. So it really depends. So that's really the only one I can think of off the top of my head that you would not be able to remove it, or it would not be able to fall off without refinancing.
How about the VA loans? If you work for a VA, but you're not active or retired military, can you get a VA loan?
To my knowledge, you have to be a veteran and you have to have a certificate of eligibility. I would have to look into that a little bit more for you, but I'm leaning more towards you would need to have that active duty, all that paperwork in order to get a VA loan.
If you change jobs frequently, does that negatively affect you in the loan application process?
That's kind of a tough question. Not necessarily. If you have a demonstrated 2-year work history, generally you're fine. It really comes down to if you're changing careers If your salary changes significantly, if you have gaps in your employment, that's definitely something to look out for. Your lender may require that you have a letter of explanation for that. Um, Also, it could be a problem if, for instance, you go from full-time to part-time. That's definitely something to look out for. Or if you go from being a W-2 employee to being 1099 or self-employed in any way, or you open a company, those are all factors that could affect and could prevent you from qualifying depending on what the situation is. It's definitely best for a lender to look at your situation individually if you think that there's a problem with your employment, so they can give you a more specific answer.
Let's say that you've applied for an ARM, so an adjustable rate mortgage,
Mhm.
but rates go up. Could you refinance and get a 30-year fixed mortgage with a lower mortgage rate? What are the penalties to do so? Can you flip-flop between the type of mortgages that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I actually did that myself way back in the day. I got an arm on, I bought an investment home and I had an arm on it because the rates were quite a bit higher than they are now. And I was like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen with this. I ended up keeping the property and just somewhat recently refinanced it into a fixed rate. No penalty, no prepayment penalty, um, no extra fees regarding that. I don't know if I would necessarily say to like just keep flip-flopping forever, just because late rates are historically low right now. In the past 20, 30 years, you've seen a significant variation in rates. My parents will talk about, and my grandparents will talk about rates that were like 18% at one point. So, I mean, if you can grab the lowest rate you possibly can, for instance, in the last few months when rates were in the low twos, I would highly suggest just taking it and sticking with it because who knows, it might not get any better than that in our lifetime.
This one I'll address. It asks about the competitive market and the inspection contingency. So one thing that we're seeing buyers do is, in order to submit an offer that does not have an inspection contingency, they're doing what's called a pre-inspection. So having the inspector come in before they submit their offer so that the offer is able to go in with less contingencies. Asking what my thoughts are about a pre-inspection or a pass-fail inspection. Would these alternatives make an offer less competitive? I just did a pre-inspection with a buyer this past week. If it's something that the seller and the seller's agent will permit, it's a great idea. Get in, and it allows you to see what's going on with the property and make a decision as to whether or not you want to submit an offer. Say there's a lot of structural damage that you didn't know about, you don't have to go through the offer process at that point. You have your decision, and all you're out is the cost of that $400 inspection. We did this pre-inspection in order to make the offer stronger, in order to submit an offer that had less contingencies, so less hoops to jump through in order to get us to a P&S or a closing. But I will say that home inspectors aren't allowed to call that pre-inspection an inspection. They're going to call it a consultation, as opposed to taking, and the thing is they're looking for all the things that they would normally look for. But I think there's just some legality about how it's titled. You're also not receiving that detailed, typed up with photos and everything inspection report that you would at the end of a traditional inspection. They're just going to sit down with you. We did a FaceTime with my client. She was unable to make the pre-inspection, and he summarized, these are the things that I'm seeing. Hope that helps you make a decision and how to price your offer. So it's not a bad idea, but something I would definitely consult with your real estate agent on. Scrolling through to see. Let's see. Regarding condos, do you automatically steer a client away from a place with a high homeowner association fee? Or do you look at the HOA history, and if there's an assessment is almost paid off? There's a lot of questions in there. I don't automatically steer clients away from anything. I won't say that. Like, if there's structural damage or extensive water damage because of an inspection, like, I'm like, get out of here. We are walking away from this deal. But in terms of high HOAs, I wouldn't steer them away. I would go see the property and then have very frank and probing conversations with the listing agent to find out, why are the HOA fees so high? Were they lower before? Did they need to get raised this year because of some type of damage to the property that they're trying to build up the reserves in order to address? Definitely, I would look into the history of the HOAs. That's that part of the equation, or I'm sorry, part of your question there. And, you know, listing agent is always going to provide, if you ask for them, the condo documents, the master insurance, the finances of the building. And from those building finances, you're really able to get a sense of, are there any current special assessments, and what do the reserve funds look like, and how is the budget being managed? Is it kind of a disaster? Do they even have a budget? So those are all just, you know, nothing I would be, you know, deter a client from looking at, but questions that I would have to probe into, and definitely give clients advice as to what I'm seeing to lead them to make what is ultimately their own decision.
And I want to add to that too. If a condo has particularly high condo fees, and this is something your lender should discuss with you when you're getting pre-approved, if the condo fees are really high, you definitely want to speak to your lender before making an offer, because if it's unusually high, it may disqualify you from, you might not be able to qualify for that condo purchase. So you just want to be sure before, if that is a red flag that comes up, that you address it with all members of your team, basically.
If anyone else has additional questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, or unmute yourself and verbally ask. I'll wait maybe another minute or so, and then if no one else has questions, we can all hop off. I will say that our contact information is on the screen. We also are on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and we'll follow up with an email too if you want to be in touch. Seeing a question about speaking to the current Boston market as well as outside of Boston. Absolutely knew this would be a question, and actually was really excited because Compass had our regional call this morning. So all of the numbers I'll give you are as of this morning, March 31st. What a wild market we're in. I'll talk kind of national trends and then dial into the Boston area, both suburban single families and condo Boston market, because I think, you know, we've probably got a mix of where people are looking. So nationally, you probably have heard in the news, in the media, that prices are at an all-time high. Prices from January 2020 versus this past January 2021 are up 11.2%, which is the highest growth we've seen in the past 15 years. So there's a number of reasons for this. 1, low inventory. 2, high buyer demand. 3, low interest rates. 4, millions of millennials are aging into their prime home buying years, which typically is their 30s. Not to mention, new construction right now is really lagging behind buyer demand. And homeowners are staying in their homes a little bit longer, we're seeing, than they had in the past. So it makes it a really difficult time to be a buyer right now. So I think, and I don't know, I think any good agent is saying, if you have the opportunity to rent for another year and increase your buying power to come back to the market next year, that's not a bad option. You might not hear an agent give you that frank advice because they want you to buy a home and get the commission on that home. But I think if that's an option that you have, that's what I've been telling my friends. They're getting married. Do we buy now? I'm saying rent for another year if you have that option, because I think your buying power in a year is going to be a little bit better. Now let's talk about the greater Boston market. We'll start with Suffolk County. So that's where that is primarily consists of Boston. And I'll speak to condos because that's primarily the type of home you're seeing there. Currently on the market as of this morning, there are just over 1,000 listings. 1 year ago, as of March 31st, there were 711. 2 years ago, 766. 3 years ago, 510. So from last year, March 31st to this year, we are seeing 48% more homes on the market. The median price in the city is down 4%. So it is a good time if you are looking to buy in the city, because we saw that urban fleeing happen as a result of the pandemic. There was a lot of demand for suburban homes, more space, being out of the city. So therefore, the inventory in the city is a little bit higher because no one was really looking to buy here, and the prices are a little bit lower. I think you'll see the opposite when we move to, like, for example, Middlesex County, which has mostly, I'll speak to single family homes. There are 406 homes on the market as of this morning versus last year, there were 1,050. 2 years ago, there were 1,440. And 3 years ago, there were 1,029 on March 1st. So inventory there is really at an all-time low. We expect it to tick up a little bit, but I wouldn't say that we're going to see it come up to where it has been in years past. So it's a really good time, especially if you're looking to buy in the suburbs, to work with a realtor to try to find off-market homes to purchase. Utilizing a local realtor that has connections with other realtors in the area that can have those conversations over coffee, or when they're seeing each other in passing, to say, what do you have coming on soon? And to try to get in before the home hits the market. We've seen a lot of homes trade that way, kind of off market or pre-market. In addition, the median price in the suburban markets is up 17% year over year. I hope that helps to paint a little bit of a picture for you. I will say, if anyone on the call is interested in getting a complimentary comparative market analysis to understand what the market's doing, specifically in the areas you're looking and specifically for the type of home you're looking for, I'm happy to pull those numbers for you. If you're looking for a 2-bedroom condo in Southie, I'll let you know how that market's performing. I have the ability to go in and get that specific.
And I will also add to that, if you are looking to look at your credit or look at your finances right now, I also will offer a complimentary meeting with you. Just go over everything and provide the best advice I can give to you going forward.
Any other questions? Thank you so much, everyone. This was such a pleasure. So fun to be able to do this with the Junior League. I think Lexi and ourselves were both members. So it's nice to be able to give back to the community in this way by just utilizing what we do every day and share it with you. I think this session has been recorded. So if you need to listen to us ever again, we will live on.
Thank you guys so much. You've been a great audience, such a pleasure. And hopefully we'll see you around soon.